Lucia is the first ever Rupture-based Ether support, and calling her strong isn't even enough to really capture just how good she is. Early and even continued testing has shown that she isn't just good, she's shaping up to be one of the best support agents in the entire game. However, when talking about Lucia, we need to look deeper than surface level performance. There are several factors influencing her results, and understanding how impactful they are is important so that you don't get misled. However, as a reminder, today's video will have footage from the creator beta server, so some values, animations, and interactions may change before release, but if you enjoyed or learned something from today's video, like, comment, and subscribe. With this out of the way, grab your monochromes and let's get started. Lucia functions as a powerful buffer who increases team damage, max HP, and rupture through her dream points and maintaining dream state. While active, she constantly performs aftershocks, adding decent ether damage and empowering her teammates at the same time. However, the main reason to take and play Lucia is to support rupture DPS, which makes sense as her additional ability grants them specifically an increase to their critical damage when granted a special effect known as Darkbreaker. What's more is that when combined with the base sheer force buff from Darkbreaker, Lucia becomes the best ally to any rupture agent, as she takes the best from other rupture supports like Panyanhu's sheer buff and Jafufu's crit damage buffs, combining them together to become a rupture DPS's best friend. Let's take a moment, however, to explain Lucia's kit, as a few of these terms need some context. Understanding dream points and the dream state is important, as they are what makes up the basis of Lucia's gameplay. That said, as a quick side note, she is pretty easy to play, as her and most supports nowadays are designed with few to no buttons required for most of their gameplay. That said, dream points act as the unique resource she needs to generate in order to enter the enhanced dream state. She generates these points though through the usage of her skills like her special / 5th basic attack, and once her gauge is full, she can then shift into the dream state where her abilities are upgraded and her team gains stronger buffs. Before entering said state though, it is worth mentioning that using her special will generate dream points with a set cooldown, but in turn, during said state, spending dream points allows her to transform some of her abilities and deal respectable damage when allies land attacks. Beyond this, I cannot stress just how important it is to maintain this dream state when possible, as losing dream points will put you closer to leaving said enhanced state. Despite this though, there are many who will find Lucia to be simple both in terms of management and play though, as resource management is really more dependent on the player and just how aware they are. Lucia's core passive, Lost Nocturne, is also a major factor that affects dream points and their impact on Lucia's damage plus buffing. Entering dream state automatically triggers a quick assist and activates Ether Veil Wellspring, and this is an effect that grants the team increased max HP for an extended duration. However, while dream state is active, this enables Lucia to also transform or enhance her abilities while also unleashing aftershocks when allies attack. Now, the main reason why performing these aftershocks and abilities is so important, however, is because every time that she does, the squad also receives Dreamer's Nursery Rhyme, a 20% damage buff. Now let's move on to her additional ability. With this, if there's a rupture or a stun character in the squad, Darkbreaker will now also apply a crit damage buff to the entire team. As a bit of a spoiler alert though, I previously mentioned having tested Lucia with non-rupture agents in my team's guide for her, but admittedly, Lucia does not provide the same level of impact that other supports do for non-rupture agents, especially when comparing to the likes of Astra or Yuzaha. Now, while this was expected, I was still curious about the teams, so I tested it anyway. Moving along, Lucia's basic attack is a standard 5-hit combo, but the final hit in said sequence will summon an ethereal with added value if you aren't in the dream state. When used without said state active, this final hit also builds dream points, which is actually very important, as entering Deadly Assault with Lucia will leave her without the ability to use her EX special immediately. On the topic of special attacks, Lucia's comes in two parts. The non-EX version, Symphony of the Reaper, can also restore 20 dream points if she's out of the dream state, but her EX special Daybreak is what's ultimately more important and what we'll focus on. Not only does this deal good damage that scales with her HP, it also grants her team the Darkbreaker effect, which is what we teased earlier to increase the lineup's sheer force and crit damage. Lucia's dodge and assist abilities are also somewhat important to keep in mind, as using her quick assist will grant her 20 dream points when out of the dream state, and her assist follow-up in turn will share a similar role, with it providing her 40. That said, these skills are sometimes used for their quick bursts of dream points or when Lucia doesn't have energy. Lucia's chain attack is a noticeable spike of damage, but the hidden value of 40 dream points attached to said skill is infinitely more valuable. Finally, let's talk about Lucia's ultimate, which was honestly teased and shown to be one of the coolest abilities that Zenless has ever designed. When used, Lucia charges forward mounted on an ethereal, but in doing so, she also reduces damage taken and applies increased resistance to interruption to herself. On top of all of this, she also prevents herself from receiving fatal damage, which is pretty noteworthy as your kind of unprotected otherwise while on top of said ethereal, even if you have 24,000 plus HP. At the end of said charge though, she slams down to cover a large area, leaving behind a healing circle that regenerates health for allies who stay inside. Now, as a reminder, the circle can also have its duration extended, but you do also need to be in the dream state with Ether Veil active. Another added feature to this ultimate is that Lucia will then gain two separate effects depending on specific conditions when using said skill. First, if using said skill while not in the dream state, Lucia will immediately gain 100 dream points. Otherwise, if she uses it while she's already in the dream state, these 100 points will be given out later and she'll re-enter the dream state immediately the next time that she exits it. In short, the ultimate is good and pretty much usable anytime you have access to it. Regarding skill priority, her core passive, special attack, and chain are the most important to upgrade first, and following this, leveling her basic, assist, or dodge, depending on how you choose to play her, is a fine order of operations. Lucia's combos are very straightforward and almost comically short because her entire gameplay loop revolves around regenerating dream points as consistently and efficiently as possible, but she's also just designed to be off-field a majority of the time. No matter what combo you're using, the goal is pretty much always the same: build dream points, enter dream state, maintain it so that she can continuously upgrade her abilities. As a result, her combos are less about complicated inputs and more about timing or aligning the right skills to cycle dream points smoothly. With this, she has access to a few combos depending on whether you have energy, her ultimate available, another support with an assist on the team, or can defensive assist with her. With this, the basic attack combo is simply to EX special and follow this with her basic attack 5. Her assist combo is a quick assist followed again by her EX special, and her assist follow-up combo is her assist follow-up followed by her basic 5 and then a special attack, or more realistically and in most cases you can simply assist follow-up into EX special or use her EX special and swap off to another agent / assist to main DPS. Finally, if you do happen to have your ultimate, this is also where you can simply use your ultimate and then swap off immediately to another agent / assist to a main DPS. But these are just a few of the different ways that you can optimize Lucia, though in most cases, since Lucia will be off field, it's fine to just go with what you have access to or feels most comfortable. Now let's talk about Lucia's build options. Lucia's signature W engine, Dreamlit Hearth, stands out as her best in slot choice and perfectly fits with every part of her kit. It grants her energy regen, and every time she activates Ether Veil, it grants the entire team a 25% damage increase alongside a 15% max HP increase for 45 seconds, and said buffs make this W engine alone do more than most support agents do with their entire kit. If you don't have access to said signature though, Kaboom the Cannon is one of her next best options. It's one of the most versatile W engines in the game for support units, providing strong energy regen and a team-wide attack buff every time an ally hits an enemy, but admittedly, attack is not exactly perfect for rupture agents since most of them scale off of HP more than attack. That said, if using Lucia for more broad purposes, this will still perform decently, and ultimately, most players will have Kaboom the Cannon built anyway, as it's good for multiple team compositions. That said, performance-wise though, Kaboom is still 23% worse than her signature. 23% is already quite the gap in performance, especially for a support agent. As a result, you may be curious about other options, and thankfully I do have others. For other free-to-play friendly alternatives, the Vault offers solid value. It grants energy regen and provides a 15% team-wide damage boost whenever Lucia applies ether damage through her special or ultimate. However, performance-wise, this is yet another engine that's near 25% weaker than Dreamlit Hearth. Even when accounting for options like Game Ball or Sokaku's signature, all choices here have a roughly 25% or greater gap in performance, and no, this really isn't about said engines being terrible, it's more about Lucia's engine just being that good. Accounting for all options, the closest two engines to Dreamlit Hearth's performance are Astra's signature and Weeping Cradle, but even these engines are respectively 13 and 19% worse than just pulling for Lucia's signature. With this, if you're curious about whether Lucia's W engine is worth it, the answer, plain and simple, is just yes. This is an engine on the same tier as Later and Caesar's W engines of the past, and the difference from having or not having an engine is very noticeable. Furthermore, though you could argue getting her first Mindscape could be more valuable, we're talking about an easier to apply, easier to pull, and still insane W engine for team performance increases, so therefore I do personally believe that this engine is worth it, especially if you plan on playing Rupture agents in the future. Now let's talk about Lucia's drive disc sets. Because she is so heavily focused on buffing the team, her strongest 4-piece options revolve around sets like Moonlit Lullaby. Not only does this provide energy regen on its 2-piece effect, but its 4-piece effect also gives the team an 18% damage increase, making it the perfect fit for her supportive role. If you don't have a full set of Moonlit Lullaby ready, the fallback here is Swing Jazz or Astral Voice, both of which are technically usable as placeholder sets. That said, the 4-piece effect of either set isn't nearly as strong as what Lullaby provides, and as a result, you should swap to Moonlight when you have the chance. For 2-piece sets, there's a bit more flexibility if you want to maximize your kit. Running Yunquei Summit to increase your sheer force, or Swing Jazz's 2-piece set if you've hit enough HP is also fine, but overall, since getting to 24,000 HP is quite difficult, Yunquei is a solid choice, especially if you're missing her signature. For her main stats, the most important focus here is to make sure she maxes out her buffs, while also testing to make sure it doesn't feel like you're running out of energy. With this, experimenting with either energy regen and HP percent on disc 6 is pretty important, as the impact of either can change depending on your playstyle, the boss, and your team. Aside from this, HP on disc 4 and 5 are a must, since again, she needs at least or close to 24,000 to maximize her buff. Now let's talk ideal stat line. As you'd guess, Lucia's goal is to get at least 24,000 HP, 2.18 energy regen, and from this point, literally any other stat that you can find, as getting to 24,000 is no easy task. But as an alternative, if you choose to use energy regen on our 6th slot, you'll be looking for roughly 2.18 to 3.12 energy regen and at least 22,000 HP. And now let's talk about Lucia's team options. Before we do though, I do want to mention that the current Deadly Assault rotation has a very strong and skewed rupture buff, making the performance and appearance of affected agents way less accurate than normal. That said, Zenless has already shown to make buffs way more impactful than you'd expect, and as a result, though this isn't anything new, the impact that this would have on character performance simply can't be overlooked. I went over said changes more in the Lucia Teams Guide video, but ultimately this buff accounted for a near 5,000 to 7,000 score increase compared to without it. Now let's talk about a few of the findings I had for Lucia in my Teams video and some conclusions that I had as well. Right now, the most dominant Lucia lineup in the entire game is Yi Xuan, Jifufu Lucia, and the gap isn't even close. The three, in a more rupture-focused Deadly Assault, absolutely smashed the newest boss, and together averaged a rough 42-second clear and 47,000 score. Even when not fighting against said boss, this team's scores were still respectably in the 37 to 40,000 range, which is pretty impressive, and since Yi Xuan is basically the closest or most competitive agent to a DPS like Miyabi, receiving her own version of Astra only makes the team more powerful. After testing ZenlessZoneZero Ambi due to my curiosity surrounding her and how well the Aftershock buffs would synergize with Lucia, she did end up showing the most impressive result among all non-rupture agents. Despite being well worse than Yi Xuan or Monado when it came to clears though, the Ambi Lucia clear times of 67 to 75 seconds, alongside 20 to 25,000 Deadly Assault scores, were impressive to say the least. When compared to non-rupture DPS as well, the gap between ZenlessZoneZero Ambi and said agents were anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 too, cementing just how much more effective she was compared to said alternatives. Now of course, I also covered less popular / conventional teams or lineups that I was simply curious about, and to my surprise, there were a few lineups that performed well, despite there being no real synergy at face value with Lucia. Miyabi, Yi Xuan, Lucia for instance had a 52-second clear and a 20 to 28,000 Deadly Assault score, which is pretty respectable, and similarly, Orphe, ZenlessZoneZero Ambi, Lucia also managed a 75-second clear with a 23 to 25,000 score too. Finally, the best version tested, Bernice, Yi Xuan, Lucia hit a 50-second clear and 28,000 score, but as I'm sure you can tell from a few of these lineups tested, these were mostly teams where Lucia would either provide middling or average value as a support, or they were lineups where Lucia and another rupture DPS like Yi Xuan were hard carrying the final member of the team to the finish line. Now let's talk about free-to-play options for Lucia. Fortunately and technically unfortunately, Monado is the only free-to-play rupture agent released as of Lucia's banner, but thankfully he is also being given out for free in said patch. Performance-wise, Monado is pretty good when paired with Lucia, but we're talking about free-to-play teams, and therefore let's take a quick look at Monado's potential free-to-play lineups. Monado, Kaleda, Lucia had a very respectable 77-second clear and a 30 to 35,000 Deadly Assault scoring, but as an alternative, Monado paired with Lucia Lucy also had strong showings, though this was also notably worse by several thousand in Deadly Assault. Now overall, though Monado is free, his performance is pretty respectable when paired with the obviously strong rupture buff from the current Deadly Assault. As always though, if you end up taking more limited supports in this case, instead of just using characters like Kaleda or Lucy, his performance is sure to continue rising. Now let's move to Mindscapes. At Mindscape 1, Lucia gains one of her most impactful upgrades, directly increasing her team's damage. Through the improvement of said buffs and the new stack mechanic that she gains, Lucia gains an overall 20% performance increase, making M1 a sizable early spike in her potential. Mindscape 2 further enhances Lucia's supportive and damage abilities inside Ether Veil Wellspring, and the result is a notable 14% jump in team-wide damage. As a result of there being so many sources of sheer force in most Lucia teams though, the value of this Mindscape may actually end up changing. At Mindscape 4, Lucia gains a minor but convenient quality of life improvement improvement through decibel increases. That said, in most cases, the actual amount of decibels earned per fight can be calculated prior to a fight, and this leaves you with a range of roughly 5 to 800 decibels depending on the scenario. Now, of course, this can also range in value depending on the team and fight that you take Lucia into, but a safe assumption is that this Mindscape can account for anywhere between a 9 and 12% team-wide DPS increase. At her final Mindscape, Lucia transitions from a pure support into a hybrid damage dealer. While inside Ether Veil, her attack now scales with a portion of her max HP, and every harmony she performs will automatically crit with increased crit damage. Finally though, let's talk about Lucia's pros and cons and whether she's worth pulling for. Lucia's team-wide damage buffs are some of the strongest that we've ever seen, and even when accounting for the extremely powerful Deadly Assault buff that could have increased or skewed her results by several thousand, she still raised the Deadly Assault scores of characters like Yixuan or Minato by 8 to 12,000 by herself, which again is just insane value. Now, in addition to this, she is the first true Astra level Rupture support, similar to how Astra and Yuzuha have completely changed Anomaly and Attack teams. Lucia now fills that same S-tier enabler role, but this time of course she's designed for Rupture DPS. With all the buffs through her sheer force and max HP though, Lucia also provides decent survivability to the team, as she can of course heal and increase the team's max HP, allowing you to play even more aggressive and be tankier. Finally, her aftershocks and harmonies still deal respectable damage while off field, meaning that she isn't just a one button and never see her again bot, she does also consistently provide damage herself while also buffing the entire team. Now, as for cons, building her can be a bit stat intensive, as reaching the ideal 24,000 HP threshold is somewhat difficult without her signature, W engine and multiple HP percent main stats, especially if you want to also run energy regen as your 6th slot. Managing dream points can also be trickier than it looks, as if you swap her in at the wrong moment, she can easily burn dream points unintentionally and drop her dream state early. Now, while her buff durations are long enough to recover, this can still feel awkward though. Now, on top of all this, she does also fall off when not paired with Rupture DPS, which means her value heavily depends on team choice and the current Deadly Assault buffs. If the rotation isn't HP or Rupture focused, her impact can feel noticeably weaker, but this makes sense as again, she's obviously designed for Rupture DPS. With this guys, Lucia is built for players who want to unlock the full potential of their Rupture DPS. She increases damage in multiple ways, brings off-field aftershocks, and offers healing / HP scaling, while also fitting into almost any Rupture lineup as the perfect support. Her versatility and scaling makes her one of the most impactful supports in the entire game, especially when paired with top-tier Rupture DPS like Yixuan or likely even Yidhari in the future. If you already own or plan to invest in Rupture characters though, she is absolutely worth pulling for, and even with the current Deadly Assault meta making her look slightly less realistic or accurate, her raw kit alone is more than enough to justify the investment. With this, I personally will be pulling for Lucia, not just because she's strong, but because she makes every Rupture character that I own significantly better. Thanks again for watching though guys, I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, good night.